Yeah, well, I was sort of born around 1937, and then within a year of that, my mother died. So I was left living down Stivington in the old farmhouse. We moved in with grandmother and grandfather for 7 or 8 years, so I had quite a lot of the war years with them, who were very strict and authoritarian people. He was a great chapel goer, and we had reading the Bible every night, and Pilgrim's Progress we read daily. So considering how I've turned out, according to my wife, she never imagined how I turned out having such a good upbringing. And so the first, they had a small dairy farm here. I used to come up as a boy, obviously, and a very small boy, and be involved in it. And then all of a sudden the war started, and of course at that age you don't really understand what it's all about. All I understood, because I wasn't very old when it started anyway, that it was very hard. There was no extra food around. We had ration cards which you could only go and get certain things with. Grandmother used to have some sort of meat once a week, and it went from sort of Sunday to Sunday, plus the vegetables that she cooked on Sunday went as well. And I thought, I'm never going to eat heated up vegetables again. As things progressed, the evacuees came, and I got friendly with one or two, very friendly with a guy called Joe Royth. He was billeted with a chap called Mr. Clark, who lived down the council houses. And again, he looked after him very well. There was lots of other boys and girls I didn't know so well, but there was the Graham sisters, who we were all in love with because they were just beautiful. And we went to Stivington School, of course. And Mr. Stafford and Miss Smiths were the teachers there. And the evacuees used to come up. Well, we got a gang together in the end. They used to come up ploughing the farm, and they'd never seen anything like this before. They'd never seen cows. They thought milk came from bottles, but they'd never seen cows, and they didn't like very much the sort of dirty side of the cows. Of course, they were fairly disgusted by that, but they took, in the end, they didn't want to leave, of course. But, you can understand little kids like that, and I didn't understand at the time, leaving their parents. And I hardly ever saw their parents come to see them. In fact, I don't remember the parents coming to see them. They obviously did, but I don't think I remember seeing any parents down. But we all got together. I remember when they first came, we thought they were a bit sort of strange, and I'm sure they thought we were even stranger. They used to call us country yokels. Then it sort of got on through the war, and but we progressed through the war with hard times and never really going out. Always in the evening we had to draw our curtains so we didn't shine any light, and if there was any light shone out, there was somebody, a warden, would come around and bang on the window and say, put that light out. And I remember that as well. Father was a special constable. He used to go around the village every night, also putting lights out and making sure nobody was out in the streets, because you weren't allowed to go out in the streets at night, because opening your door would shed light onto them, then the Germans would bomb you, in theory anyway. And then as the war progressed, prisoners of war came. There was a big camp just up here where John Cannons is. That was a big camp. There was 400 prisoners there. And the other side of the road, where they're now going to the parachuting, there were some buildings there. They were there. There was wash places and that down which we call Gypsy Lane. And it was a very open affair. When they say prisoners of war, they just came and walked about as they wanted. There was no security. But they weren't going to escape anyway. I don't know where they were going to escape to, so nobody ever escaped because they didn't want to. And we had 6 working on our farm. Again, as a small boy, I couldn't make any judgments of anybody. They were very nice people. They cared for us. They played with us. They worked very hard on the farm. I've got something there that they built for me. They're a bit old and battered now, but they built 2 little toys for me. And they really weren't nice people, and we all were sorry when they went home. The other thing I always remember, grandmother had up to 6 at a time Canadian pilots and Air Force crew which came from Kingscliff, and she had them lodging. And time the end of the war came, 4 of them had been killed. And I always remember when they used to tell us, I don't know how they told us, but I knew that something had happened because she'd been floods of tears. Everyone that was killed, she absolutely broke down and cried. And I never, as a little child, really understood why all the fuss was about, but she obviously felt it greatly. And then we had things like, I suppose, the Home Guard. I felt when I've seen one on television. Well, somebody must have known exactly what went on, because it's not made up. It's absolutely the truth of what went on down there. Dad's Army, the second they were. Well, that when they first had guns, they wouldn't issue them with live ammunition because they weren't safe. But then they took the bolts out of the guns, so they couldn't fire them anyway. Which all seemed, again, as a little boy, it didn't register with me. But since then, I've thought, well, what a load of rubbish that was, because if anybody had attacked us, we could have never defended ourselves. And then we had a V2 rocket land just up on the railway line, just up there. There was one landed there, and another one landed up on what was then Sibson Aerodrome, because that was a training aerodrome for the RAF. And then occasionally we used to get, we've seen very low flying over here, a Messerschmitt or something like that, just occasionally. And again, we were alerted as small children, and the story was that Wittering alerted Sibson that there was one round, and they would put a Spitfire up to chase it, and it came over Sibson, and they were supposed to shoot it down because it tried to bomb the airfield up there. Well, there was only a grass runway, but they were cleaning the one and only gun, ACAC thing they'd got at that stage, so they couldn't shoot it down because it was in pieces. Dad's Army, no, it's not exaggerated, it's exactly the truth. There used to be American convoys come along the A1, all 40, 50 lorries, I don't know where they were going, but full of American troops and pulling things. And as long as we stood on the A1 and we used to do this to them, they used to throw sweets out to us. And that was brilliant, because we didn't really see sweets. And then they sometimes used to stop for half an hour, and we all used to go to them. And they were so good to us, they gave us sweets, and we came back with packets of tin and milk and all sorts of tin milk, which my grandmother, hadn't seen for some time. We got all these luxury goods. From my point of view as a child in the war, it was quite fun, really. We never realised the danger because we didn't understand it. We knew our parents, or my grandparents and my father, they were quite worried at times, and obviously these Canadian Air Force people were occasionally being killed, but again, as a small boy, that doesn't register that much on you. We had great fun. The evacuees were all our big friends, and one of them comes back all the time, and the two Gower girls, who were absolutely gorgeous, and one was a little blonde girl, and I was deeply in love with her, even at 6.
Ellen and Rose Gower.
Yeah.
What about taking you back to school days? Because you obviously started school during the war years, and you remember the Miss Smiths and Mr. Stafford. Any other particular memories about what it was like at school?
Well, it was quite strict, and we used to have to do gas mask drill every day. We used to go out at play time at 11 o'clock, and it was gas mask parade. You got your gas masks out, and you put them on, and you kept them on, and you breathed in them, and took them off until next day. But we had to bring them to school every day and keep them we had a proper bag, and keep them in our bag, and we had to keep them by our desk. But the only thing they thought was a bit dangerous, because we had Wittering, which was an active Air Force station, and so they thought, and which in actual fact happened a bit later on in the war, where these Messerschmitts, a couple of them flew over, and we all, I don't know why, but we all saw them. And they were very low. I mean, say they're only just above the sort of trees, very low. And then we heard one drop some bombs up here at a training station, really, at Sibson. But they didn't get to Wittering, because they actually had got a Spitfire in 2 or 3 pieces and managed to get off the runway before it bombed anybody. But it's just a gun up here that sort of didn't work.
Yeah, what about, you said a bit about the sort of things that the children did, games you played or leisure time pursuits.
Yes, we in the summer we did all play cricket, but then we did form a couple of gangs, and we had a sort of almost a gang rivalry. This hill here, we all built, there was a fuel tank from an airplane landed in one of the fields somewhere, and we got that and we made it into a sort of 4-wheel thing, and used to push it down this hill and let it go on pram wheels, and that was great fun. So we used to do that, and that was great fun. And yeah, it was off of a fortress. It was as long as this room, probably longer. A sort of tubular thing where they carried the extra fuel in, and we just converted it. And that was where the evacuees were probably more clever than we are at doing things like that. We were the country bumpkins, and they were quite clever at that sort of thing. Used to go swimming, play cricket, bit of football, rounders, and played down the Stibbington village on the green there, and in the field just opposite there we all used to play down there. But there was no parental control over us those days. You could, we just said we're going out when we were on school holidays. We're going out at sort of 9 o'clock, and we'll see you back later. And nobody ever used to bother. So we would totally did as we liked, and we used to go down those gravel pits down there, which they were digging some of those out for the war, and we used to have They used to have the whole boat down there. We used to go, and that was totally unsafe. It used to get full of water time we got back, and if our mothers or our parents had seen us, they'd have had a nervous breakdown. So we used to do that as well. Anything fairly dangerous, and we used to walk around the whole wall because we knew the guy who looked after that would come and shout at us, so that was fun. So we used to walk along the top of the wall, and as soon as he came we could see him come in, jump off, and he couldn't run as fast as us anyway, we knew that. Yeah, and we used to spinning across here, we used to go climbing trees and things like that, and we used to get ropes and put between the trees. Yeah. Everything that my grandchildren are not allowed to do now. There'd be health and safety and God knows what. Yeah. But we did it. Oh, Joe Roythy broke his arm once, fell out of a tree, but that wasn't too much of a problem. Yeah, the police were quite strict. Everybody was quite strict, really, especially in the evening. They all took it quite seriously about lights and about not going out on the street. And I wouldn't say it was a curfew, but it was close to a curfew. You weren't welcome on the street after dark, that's for sure. I don't know who the ARP warden was. I know Father was a special constable, but they all, and the policeman, they all got together and they all sort of did parts of the village where they looked after, and certainly didn't tolerate any heavy drinking or anything like that. So what else? What
about any recollections of the end of the war?
I do remember, again, it didn't register so much on us. They sort of VE Day or whatever it was came along, and there was a lot of flags, and I remember we went down to the village and had a bit of a party. But again, we sort of enjoyed it before we had the party. We were doing all right in the war. We lot were. And I mean, it's a nasty thing to say, but we did. We were very happy. We were all playing together. And of course, we didn't realise what was going on anyway. Yeah, when it all stopped and the evacuees all went back, it was all sad, really, because there was the school, half the school went. There was nobody really left to play with. We'd got Brian Howard, Doug Stokes, Richard Coles, myself, and there wasn't many others of us left then at school. There was only, let me say, it must have halved Stevenson School, I would have thought. Yeah, we missed them, actually. It was sad for us when it all sort of ended in a way. Well, we had the V2 bomber up the railway, and then another V2 up there, plus one bomb from this Messerschmitt. Yeah, and the German prisoners, they certainly stood out as being different. But again, we made friends with them. We didn't know what they were or understood that you're not supposed to like them. We got on very well with them. And they used to play with us. It was wonderful, really. And again, we were sad when they went as well. And I do remember also they used to have 2 bus loads go from the camp there to the Sugar Corporation, and they had a very good black market system because they used to pinch sugar from the Sugar Corporation and bring it home and sell it to the local residents. So we always had plenty of sugar. Sugar wasn't a problem.
Well, I take it food wasn't a problem, really. Once you sort of accepted that it was in short supply.
Yeah,
there were other sources, rabbits and dogs.
Yes, and of course living on a farm, and it was a dairy farm. We always had plenty of milk, and the odd calf would die, and you'd eat that and things like that. So it was all regulated because all the milk you had was desperately needed, and all the food we produced was desperately needed, and they knew exactly what you were doing, so you couldn't sell it off privately or anything like that. It was all regulated, but by living on a farm and by living in the country, as you said, we didn't have a great variety of food, but we never went short of food. I couldn't say that cabbage was my favourite food after the war, but or rabbits either, coming to that. But grandmother had a great way of making every rabbit different and tasting different, and even if we did eat it for a week, it was sort of... Yeah, I as children, I think the evacuees must have been terrible when they left their parents and came here. But again, with children, within a short space of time, they were made welcome. They'd got plenty of friends here. Nobody treated them other than their own children. And we're all happy together. And we weren't very happy with them for a start. Of course we weren't. They weren't very happy with us. But after a couple of months, we all got together and sort of got friends.
To each other, yeah.
They had some teachers came from London with them as well. Did you have any recollection of...
I don't remember them.
Mr. Winston or Mr. Straw?
They were perhaps teaching the elder ones.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, because we were very much in the right-hand building as you look right-hand room.
Yeah.
The two Messrs. Smiths were in there, ruling with great severity.
Lillian and Mary.
Yes, that's the ones. Yeah, I mean, again, they were lovely people, really. They absolutely tried their best. Again, in that era, they were so strict compared to what everybody does now. You had to do what you were told, and we still broke the rules. We still did naughty things and got into trouble. But then you got the cane then, of course, which I suffered from quite a lot. But
and what did you do to deserve that?
well, trapped people's fingers in the drawers and things like that, and brought animals in, sort of a dead rabbit into the form, and we weren't supposed to, and keep it in the corner and sort of hide it till there was a smell and things like that. And they just lost a sense of humour, the Mrs. Smiths did. So we were sent to Mr. Stafford for the cane, which was administered with a couple of strokes. It wasn't that bad, really. We all decided you couldn't let him see you cry, so none of us were going to cry. And came back and decided to take it out on the Mrs. Smiths for sending us for caning. No, we always had that sort of ridiculous sense of adventure and doing something naughty, because that was fun. And it was even more fun because they didn't like it. And the evacuees were pretty good at that. They were better than we were, I think. They were more dangerous inclined than we were.
Can you remember the names of any more evacuees, of any of the others?
Well, there's Arthur and Terry Lerner. They were two. There was Joe Royth, and there was the Gower girls. That was about it. That was our sort of friendly gang. I think there were some others, but I don't recall so much of them. They were the lot we all used to play together with. Richard Coles, Brian Howard, Doug Stokes and myself. We all got in a gang, and we were like the gangs of New York or something. We all sort of met together in the woods over there Saturday mornings and talked evil things. Never did anything, but we talked a good story. Yeah, we used to meet in that wood over there, and I always remember that because there was a tree in there. We used to meet round this tree, and it was an evergreen. We used to sit underneath it and plot who we were going to fight, but never happened really.
So you were living in one of these houses along here, presumably?
Yeah, I lived in that one, the far one.
Yeah.
I started off living down the farmhouse, which is the Peaks live in now.
Oh, right.
Towards the end of the war, mother and father married again then, and he moved into one of the council houses down there, number 3 council house, I remember it well. And so I was then all together with my friends. Yeah, the Lerners, Arthur and Terry Lerner never came back, but the Gower girls and Joe Royth still comes back today. So, and the other thing I remember, when I lived down number 3 council house, Mother used to take us out, it must have been towards the end of the war, and see masses of aeroplanes flying over to go and bomb Germany. And we used to go out in the evening. It was a moonlight night. You could see all the bombers and planes, and there seemed to be hundreds of them. And there was down there when we lived, there was no toilets, no electricity. We had an Aladdin lamp, which is an oil-fired thing, but we had a job to get the oil. We never had flush toilets, just had a bucket we sat on a sort of wooden lid, and Father used to once a week empty it down the bottom of the garden. There was and I thought it was an American one, crashed up there at Wansford, and that was great excitement for us. We all used to go up there every day and fetch bits off the aeroplane. I mean, the fact that there was bodies laying everywhere was neither there to us. We weren't bothered about that. It didn't register with us. I thought it was a flying fortress from King's Cliff with an American crew. And yeah, we never actually saw any bodies. But we were there the next day, and there was all guarding around it. Well, of course, it didn't guard against us because we could creep under the hedge. We knew where to go. And we used to go and grab bits off the aeroplane and come back out again. There was a wooden house there with a chap called Mr. Ofield, who was the Sunday school teacher. And the wheel of one of these aircraft, that aircraft that crashed, hit the side of his house and knocked a lump out the side of his house. That house has now been demolished. No, it's gone now, that wooden house that he used to live in. And then the plane went across the road and just crashed into the field. And that was a big event in the village, that was.
I'm sure.
And a terrible event because apparently all the crew were killed. The gang went up there and some of us kept watching, the others dashed through the hedge and grabbed bits. I remember American servicemen were guarding it, and I don't think they ever saw us. So it provided great fun and great excitement from our point of view. And I say I'm not being callous or nasty. It was just how we saw it at the time. It was fun to us. One of the things I said when I got to be a parent, I wanted to be involved with my family. I hardly ever saw my father. I never sat on his knee. I don't think I ever held my hand. It was all too busy those days. I knew him, but I didn't know him as a person as such, because he was always up milking the cows, or from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. And then when he came home, at that stage, it wasn't long before I went to bed. My grandmother put me to bed, so I'm not being unkind to them because they looked after me well, but they weren't great family people. They were hard. Grandmother used to have a wooden spoon, which I used to get. If you left any food, you got hit with a wooden spoon. I used to sit here, she sat there, and she got a drawer, and I was always a slightly fussy eater, and rabbit for 7 days is a bit on, really. And so by about 6 days, and the wooden spoon hit me on the back. Eat that up. And you're not leaving this room until you eat that up. And they used to go off into the lounge then, when I was still sat there, because I was fairly stubborn as well. And when they'd gone out, I used to get my plate and go outside and tip it outside and come back, finished! But unfortunately, they were as clever as I was, and it wasn't long before they spotted that. And of course, grandfather, being a lay preacher and devoutly religious, you can never have a swear or anything else. Of course, the Americans and the Germans we used to associate with gave us a few swear words, and I used to go home and swear. And God, I thought he was wondering he'd have a heart attack. When I said the first sort of bugger to him like that, he stood there. Again, I didn't realise the enormity of the situation. I thought it was quite normal. Everybody else was doing it. He didn't do that again. I don't think I was a model child. Again, our life really around here was pretty happy, because we didn't have when the doodlebug, as they called it, landed, that was a bit of fun. We all had to go up and see that. It was highly dangerous, and I have somewhere got some, I think they would be classed as live shells from the war, and I've got them in a box at home up in the roof somewhere. One day they get a fire, the whole place is going to be machine gunned, but there's machine gun shells we got off this plane we got. There's bullets of all sorts that we collected, because again we were able to collect all those sort of things and nobody really bothered about us.